Okay, let's move on to chapter 11. Chapter 11 is a big chapter. Chapter 10 was short, but chapter 11 covers all sorts of stuff. We talk about land management in terms of agriculture here, but we also talk about different factors about feeding ourselves as humans as we move on in society. So, what we're going to do is we're going to start talking about nutrition for humans. And there's different things, there's different terms that we're going to go over, and you do need to know what those are. First, let's talk about what undernutrition is. Undernutrition is not getting enough general food. So, this is people who starve. Which is very, very sad to think about. And if you look at the statistics, it's actually on the rise. And you would think that that's not the case. You think that in society today around the world, we would typically have a pretty well founded nutrition system around the world, but we don't. A lot of third world countries are really struggling. And then whenever you think about things, even such as like, people losing their jobs with COVID and lockdown and all that, those economic issues really do affect people's ability to get food. So there's three major terms here. So there's undernutrition. That's what we were talking about, where basically you are starving. You are not getting enough calories, just bulk calories. We're not even talking about, vitamins and minerals per se, as we are just saying you're not getting enough energy in your body to properly be healthy and to work. Malnourished is that's where you're referring to missing out on certain nutrients. And you could be missing out on anything. It's very likely that you or someone in your family is malnourished in some form. I know it sounds horrible to think about, but even if you have, a lot of people are vitamin D deficient. You don't go outside very often. A lot of people spend a lot of time indoors. And that's actually one issue that they're having in people with major COVID responses and people who are getting extremely sick with it, is that they're vitamin D deficient. There are other ways that you could be malnourished as well. People who follow a very low carb, like ketogenic diet, if they are not getting enough carbohydrates, that's what your brain really wants to use for fuel, is carbohydrates. Then what happens is your body ends up having to convert muscle tissue into energy, which is a very hard process on your system. Your liver doesn't appreciate it very much either. And in order for your brain to get those carbs, and so that could lead to malnourishment as well. Overnutrition is where you just eat way too much. Many Americans suffer from this, especially, I mean, there are a lot of newer studies that are showing more and more evidence that certain additives in foods or certain things in foods, such as fats and sugars, are highly, highly, highly addictive. And so that can lead to overnutrition. And it's like whenever that's why McDonald's French fries taste oh so delicious, is because they have like a satiating factor in that you want more, right? It's delicious. I want more. I want more. Food security is a lot of reason why so many people may be undernourished or malnourished. A lot of it is because they don't have access to food. And so food security is dealing with the fact that you are relying on things like food banks in order to see your next meal, handouts from others and organizations such as that. And if you think about countries and very rural areas where there's not a lot of development, food security is based highly on seasons. So if you don't get prepared and store food for the upcoming season, you could very well be in danger of not having food security. A famine is a type of food insecurity, but this is where it's usually caused by something like a political upheaval, a coup, Therefore, it's causing a lot of refugees to have to move into one area very quickly. And that, or it could also be due to crop failure. It could be due to an invasion of a pest that would ruin a crop that an area is highly reliant on. Drought, other natural disasters also could lead to famine. These are not nice pictures, I know, I'm sorry. So famine isn't necessarily a long-lived phenomenon. Famines usually last for shorter periods of time, but they can leave a very striking end, right? People suffer long-term from having not had enough nutrition, even for a shorter period of time. And this poor little girl over here on the right, this is, I always mispronounce it, kwashiorkor, and this is a protein deficiency. That bloated belly is representing the fact that she's not getting enough protein in her diet. So she may be only eating things maybe like cornmeal, mush, or rice, which is not providing her with enough nutrients and especially protein to grow. Malnutrition, this is what we were talking about earlier about how you can be deficient in one or two vitamins or minerals. All around the world, there's different types of malnutrition that are more prevalent in certain areas than others. Vitamin A is extremely important in the development of your eyesight as a child. So that's why your mom may have always, or your grandmother always said, eat your carrots. Okay, yeah, that's where that comes from. Iron is another mineral which several thousands, millions of people are deficient in. That is also sometimes linked to having a vegan diet because you're not getting enough iron, which a lot of iron you get from meat products, especially red meat products. Goiters are typically associated with something like an iodine deficiency, and basically it happens around the thyroid and the neck. And it could also be caused by a couple of other things as well, but iodine is the most common. That's why they have iodized salt, is they started adding iodine to the salt. It doesn't alter the taste in any way, but it's enough to help make sure that is not an issue in someone's nutrition here in the United States. Now, in terms of what we do eat, grains make up the largest component of a human's diet by far. It's almost 60% of your daily calorie intake is probably basically made up of grains. Most of those here, especially here in modern world, are going to come from corn, wheat, and rice. Meat is the second largest, and meat consumption is also very highly correlated with economic growth and the stability of an economy of an area. So the more economically stable you are, the more likely you are to be able to afford meat and add it to your diet. In some areas, actually, they don't eat meat, but maybe once or twice a week, and because it's a luxury almost. You can see how our meat consumption in the United States is by far much, 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 much higher than the rest of the globe. Most of the time we think of a dinner plate as having a meat, a carb, and a vegetable or something like that. So, but, that's just the way we here that's the way our society is kind of like managed, and that's what we believe or grow up, following that. But you can just see in comparison, our meat consumption is, it's remarkably higher. Grain production has increased historically since we have had some agricultural breakthroughs in terms of GMOs and all this kind of stuff, which we'll talk about, different farming practices. And so you can see how grain production has increased. And here in the United States, we can grow grain a lot more efficiently and effectively than we used to. And we'll talk about why that is again coming up soon. So the major reasons why people may be undernourished or malnourished is because they just don't have the money for the food, and it's poverty. Sometimes it's also linked to political and those economic factors that we kind of discussed in passing in the former slides. And also sometimes, and especially in rural areas, if you are a farmer and you have livestock that you are responsible for feeding, what another issue that could happen is that you end up using your own agricultural products that you have grown to help feed those animals, which you also need. So that can also be a reason for this. And for the future, if we keep continuing with our population growth as it currently is, it looks like we'll be about 9 billion people by about 2050. Remember, it's 2021 now, so in 30 years, that's where they're thinking we will be. And so that means that we're going to really have to revolutionize agriculture, and we're going to have to improve how much we get from those these processes and our crop yields. We're probably going to have to reduce the amount of meat that we eat, and it could be any combination of these, but we're going to have to make changes in order to survive. So because you have so much more, with so many more people, you have to have more food. Okay, now we're going to move on to the next clip.